Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Friday. Yay, it's Friday. Yay. Friday Star Trek Next Generation recap. Rah! And I've surpassed 200 subscribers. Fingers crossed it stays that way. I have a habit of losing as many subscribers as I get. But thank you all for subscribing. If you could do a few likes. I didn't realize this until it started happening because now I'm getting negative thumbs down, and I would appreciate a thumbs up instead. And if you want to do a thumbs down, could you not do it? Just don't do anything. Those thumbs down really hurt the analytics. Dang, it only takes one and it knocks 15% off. Who knew? I never had enough people watching my channel to have these different analytics. All of a sudden, these other analytics showed up. They never showed up before because I never had anybody watching my channel before. So, anyway, this is the D. Louise book series, and I'm Christina Kristina, and this is where we read books and talk books, and also recap Star Trek Next Generation every single Friday because I'm a series person and I like character progression. And I love to binge read a series, and this is a good binging series to do. And I hope to follow through with maybe a couple of the movies and then go into Star Trek Voyager after that. But we are in season 5. This is disc 3. This is episode 211. I hope you enjoyed the unification ones previously on the last disc. With Sarek and Spock and Kathy Crosby being back on the show. So I hope you go back and check those out. I've been doing these every week of over 70 episodes, and I would appreciate your support. If I could do these live, I would, but there's too many copyright issues, and I'd probably get in trouble. Besides, I did try live last year, playing Boggle every single night at 7 p.m., and nobody showed up for like a month, so I quit doing them because I was like, I was trying to play Boggle with you and no one showed up. So obviously that wasn't your cup of tea. But anyways, we did Matter of Time, we did New Ground, and now we're doing Hero Worship. So these were all good episodes. So we get to it. Oh, I forgot to do It's Nice to Meet You. I'm trying to learn sign language for my Victoria Thompson books. So we'll get to that. So where was we? We start the episode with a captain's voiceover. Captain's log stardate 45397.3. Could someone tell me what those numbers mean? If you're still around here, could you tell me what those actual in civilian date means? That would be most appreciated. I've been curious about that. 2 days ago, Starbase 514 lost contact with research vessel VICO, which was sent to explore the interior of a black cluster. We are en route to investigate. So the ensign says, Captain, we are entering Sector 79. Data says, I'm picking up massive gravitational fluctuations, sir. Picard says, take us out of warp. The ensign says, yes, sir. Worf says, the black cluster is within visual range, Captain. So we put it on screen. Worf says it looks like any other streak of black against a star cluster. Riker says, let's find that ship. Full sensor sweep, Mr. Data. Data says, aye, sir. Riker says, what a sight. Picard says, one of the most ancient formations in the galaxy. Data says, I have located the VICO, sir. The vessel appears to be adrift. Riker says, life signs. Worf says, nothing, Commander. Riker says, damage report, Mr. Data. Outer and inner hulls have been breached. Decks 7 through 12 are exposed to space. Riker says, set up a translink to their computer core. Let's see what happened. Data says, I cannot, sir. The emergency bulkheads on that deck are in place. Our link-up signal cannot penetrate them. Picard says, structural status, Commander. Data says, stress readings indicate considerable pressure on the transverse supports. Picard, is it stable enough for an away team? Data says, yes, sir, but the risk of structural collapse is quite high. Picard says, have transporter room maintain a lock on each member of your away team. I want you out of there at first sign of trouble. Riker says, take us to 15 meters, Ensign. Ensign says, yes, sir. Riker says, you're with me. Now, I know I've mentioned this before, and it's a little bit of a pet peeve with me. I know it's the circumstances of the ship. I know it's part of the plot line. I know. But I still can't see anything. Could you turn the lights on? Oh, there she goes again. Every single video I've ever done. Oh, good. She's not binging. That's good. So they beam over to the other ship, and they're checking out all the different apparatus. And Data says, this station is inoperable, sir. LaForge says, this one seems to be stuck in a feedback loop. Riker says, let's see if we can tap directly into the computer core. And LaForge takes off this thing and looks at this thing. And he says, the ODN is here. And LaForge calls for Data and puts the CP. Data goes over to help. And they're looking around the room. And they find the little boy. They're all checking out the equipment here. At least the lighting's getting a little bit better. Okay, so then they find the little boy. Okay, then we have another captain's voiceover. Captain's log supplemental. A young boy shielded from our initial sensor scans has been discovered pinned beneath a fallen beam. The degree of damage to the VICO is making our rescue attempt difficult. First, I want to know where Calamini is. If we're doing a big segment on the transporter room, I want to know where our pal Calamini is. But anyways, so Picard says, transporter room, can you lock on? And he says, to lock on to him and transport him directly to sickbay. And Hutchinson says, I'll try, but there's a lot of shielding to pull him through. Picard says, acknowledge. Picard to Crusher. Crusher, sickbay here, Captain. Prepare for an emergency transport. Crusher says, yes, sir. And so they try and do the old transport thing, and it doesn't work. So they try and transport the boy out, and they try a few times, and it doesn't work. So it turns out that they're going to have Data do it. They're going to have Data lift him up, pick him up, and run out to the hallway, and then beam onto the Enterprise, because it's safer out in the hallway to do the beam. But first, Data and not Data, Geordi and Riker are going to beam out first. So Riker and LaForge beam back to the Enterprise. Data explains to the boy that he's going to lift up the beam and take him out into the corridor. And the boy's like, how can you lift something that's so strong, so heavy? And Data explains that I'm an android. My strength is many times of that of a human. It's going to be okay. I can count to three. 1, 2, 3. He picks up the beam, picks up Timothy. They run out to the hallway. They get back to the Enterprise. So Data and the boy beam over to the sick bay, and we get a captain's log. A thorough search of the VICO has revealed no additional survivors. We have begun the processing of counseling the boy with regard to the tragedy. So they're checking out the boy in sickbay, and Timothy's saying we were in the black cluster. I don't know where they came from. They had a big ship and they kept shooting at us. They beamed over. They had purple helmets on and phaser rifles. I saw them. They didn't see me. Dr. Crusher tells him, "You're safe now, Timothy. I'm sorry for what happened. It's going to be all right. I bet you're hungry. Would you like me to get you something to eat?" And Timothy's like, uh-huh. And then Data says, "Counsel, I must join Commander LaForge in engineering if you'll excuse me." But Timothy's got a hold on Data's hand, and Troy says, "Timothy, would you like Data to stay a little longer?" And Timothy's like, uh-huh. So then we're in engineering, and Geordi is explaining that the sections of the primary and secondary hull were torn right off. The shearing planes are here, here, and here. Picard says, "How much longer until we can access their logs?" Geordi says, "An hour." Picard says, "The boy was here. The hallway outside the computer core. His mother was the ship's systems engineer. The second away team found her body here inside the core. And his father, the ship's second officer, he was most likely on the bridge when it was exposed to space." Picard says, "Most likely." So then we're back in sickbay, and Timothy has fallen asleep. So Dr. Crusher says he'll sleep for a few hours at least. I don't need to keep him here, but I will need to see him again tomorrow. You've got work cut out for you, she says to Troy. Troy says, "His whole world is gone, Data. We're going to have to help him build a new one." Okay, so then we're in engineering. Geordi says, "This is not good. Whatever hit the VICO must have set up an EM pulse that flashed through their computer banks." Data says nearly 83% of their records have been lost. LaForge says, "All of their sensor logs. Let's use what we've got from our own sensors. I'll call up the structural analysis and the surface scans." Uh, Data asks Geordi, "As a child, did you ever have a traumatic event?" And Geordi says, "You're wondering about Timothy." And Data says, "Yes." And Geordi says, "I was caught in a fire once. I must have been, I don't know, about 5, I guess. It was before I got the first visor. It was only a couple minutes before my parents found me and pulled me out. And nobody got hurt, but I tell you, that was the longest 5 minutes of my life. It was a while after that before I could even let my parents get out of earshot. It was like I was absolutely needed to know where they were, you know?" And Timothy no longer has that kind of support. And Geordi says, "Yeah." So Timothy has formed a bond with his rescuer. So we're going to be talking about that too. So then we're in the classroom, and the teacher is saying that Dara and her brother found themselves in the land of Tagus, where ruler Elamos the Magnificent had proclaimed his law, "No children will be tolerated within the great kingdom." When Dara saw the proclamation, she just laughed and said, "How magnificent a ruler to be frightened by the likes of us." And the teacher tries to talk to Timothy and tries to get him back to participate with the other students. And Timothy doesn't want to. He wants to work on his structure. So the teacher just lets him be. So then we're back on the bridge again. Geordi says magnetic residual analysis confirms that the VICO was attacked inside the black cluster. The gravitation wave fronts pushed the ship to where we found it. Picard says no signs of phaser burns on the hull. Geordi says no. Terrestrial stress levels point to a disruptor-style weapon. Data says fracture points indicate the energy burst came from a range of less than 3,000 meters. Picard says that's a strategy consistent with a cloaked vessel, Romulan or Klingon, but we're quite a distance from either of their territories. Data says Breen have outposts in this sector. The attack on the VICO is consistent with their battle tactics and their level of technology. Picard says, thank you, Data, but what would the Breen be doing inside the black cluster? The boy described a boarding party with helmets and phaser rifles. Geordi says, boarding party? I don't think it was a boarding party, sir. Geordi says, there was absolutely no evidence of anybody coming on board the VICO. We would have found a transporter field trace, or if someone had used the entry ports, we would have found an electrostatic differential in the docking latches, and we didn't. Could Timothy have imagined that, Counselor? Picard says, or could he be lying? Troy says, if he's lying, I haven't been able to sense it. Perhaps his emotional trauma level is too high. Picard says, why wouldn't he tell us the truth? Troy says he's still in shock. It's hard to know what's going on in his mind right now. Geordi says, well, I'll go back and check the sensor readings again, but I don't think we're going to find anything. Troy says, I think we should ask Data to spend more time with him. Data says, I don't understand. Troy says, I'm very worried about his behavior, and what I've just heard doesn't make me feel any better. Data, you're the only one he's reached out to because you rescued him. We can use your relationship with him to help his recovery. Picard says, would Timothy be more inclined to tell Data the truth about what happened? Troy says, it's a possibility. Picard says, Commander, proceed with Timothy as the counselor suggests. Aye, sir. And then Data asks Troy, exactly how should I proceed? And Troy says, just be with him. Your presence he can trust, and that's what he needs most right now. Okay. So we're back in Timothy's quarters, and he's building this temple structure. And Data comes in and says, hello, Timothy, may I enter? And Timothy says, yeah. Data says, are you attempting to recreate a Darkarian temple of Coral Hennis? Timothy said, isn't it great? See, there's the hallway the teacher told us about. That's where everybody came in. That's where everybody stood. And that's where the altar was. What do you think? Data says, do you wish a frank evaluation? Data says, it lacks the harmony that characterizes this particular temple, the Darkarian and general culture. Timothy says, you hate it. Data says, no, I'm not capable of hate. Timothy says, I can't do anything right. Data says, you are making an unwarranted explanation. I was merely offering an anesthetical analysis of the particular model. The base appears quite sturdy. Timothy comes back because he had destroyed it. So let's go forward here. So he tries to build it, and he only builds the one side and puts the cover on. He never puts the other side on. So it falls, and he gets frustrated again. And then Data is called away. So before Data leaves, Data repairs the structure. I just wanted to say that Data's speed, I can't show it because of copyright issues, but Data's speed like this reminds me of the Bionic Woman and the Bionic Man when they would do something really quickly. It's the same kind of special effects. It just reminded me of that. I got a question for you. I don't know how old he is, 10, 12, but why isn't there a parent, not a parent, but a supervisorial person in the room with him? They just left this little kid in a room all by himself with no one to talk to, maybe stay with another family, maybe have another kid in the room. They just left him completely 100% alone. I don't get it. Shouldn't he have somebody checking on him? Shouldn't there be someone staying with him? Just a little someone to be there in case something happens or needs somebody or something. I'm just saying. So they're in the observation room, and I got a guest co host. She came by to see how everybody was. She usually doesn't show up for Star Trek ones, she just usually shows up for book ones. But we got a special guest, Miss Sandy, under your claw. There we go. She's so teeny tiny. She's the baby of the family. So we're in the observation lounge, and Data says the black cluster was formed almost 9 billion years ago when hundreds of protostars collapsed in close proximity. The resulting gravitational forces are both violent and highly unpredictable. LaForge says to get anywhere near the center, we're going to have to push through the gravitational wave fronts like the science vessel was designed to do. I've already adjusted our shields accordingly. Worf says the gravitational forces will affect sensor accuracy. Detecting an enemy vessel will be difficult. Goodbye. Bye. I'm going. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye 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 bye. Riker says maybe that's what happened to the VICO too. They didn't see anything coming until it was too late. Picard says, Counsel, the boy has volunteered any further information? Troy says, no, but I do have an appointment with him in less than half an hour. Picard says, if there's a possibility of getting more from him, I'd like you to pursue it. We need to continue our investigation. We'll enter the black cluster at 0700 hours tomorrow. And it's nice or not nice, however you want to look at it, that several hundred years in the future we'll still be using military time for time. She came back. Now she wants to leave again. So Troy goes to Timothy's door, and he's wearing imitation of Data's uniform. And Troy says, hello, Timothy, are you ready to go? And Timothy says, yes, Counsel, I'm ready. And Troy says, how are you feeling? And Timothy says, I'm functioning within established parameters. Troy says, established parameters? You sound like Data. Timothy says, well, an android. Troy says, I see. Well, let's go for a walk, shall we? And Timothy says, yes, that shall be acceptable. So then they're in 10 forward. And Troy says, so what would you like to eat? And Timothy says, androids do not eat or drink. However, sometimes we like to taste things, because he sees ice cream walk by. A Tamarian Frost, please. Would you like anything, Counsel? No. Troy says, no, I'm fine, thank you. Timothy says, as you wish. Troy says, so you're no longer human? Timothy says, I'm an android. Troy says, when did this happen? Timothy says, I've always been an android. Troy says, what's it like being an android? Timothy says, I'm designed to exceed human capacity, both mentally and physically, but I do not experience emotions. No emotions at all. And Timothy says, that is correct. So then Data, Troy, and Picard are having a meeting. And they obviously are telling Picard that Timothy considers himself an android now. Troy says, I know it sounds unusual, but it's understandable. Technically, it's called enantomonia, conversation into the opposite. Timothy went from human to machine, from being emotional to being emotionless, but that's the underlying trauma is still there. He just found a new way to suppress it. And Picard says, Counsel, how long will this behavior last? Troy says, as long as it needs to. Timothy is rebuilding his identity as best he can. The android persona is just one step along the way. As soon as he feels stronger and more sure of himself, it will drop away naturally. Picard says, I assume this is not time to confront him about what happened on the ship. Troy says, not yet, but the best thing we can do right now is let Timothy take us where he wants to go. We should support the process and encourage it. So Picard says, I'd like you to make Timothy the best android he can be. So then Data's trying to fix Timothy's hair to be like his, and he does it. And Data's like, stop moving your head. And Timothy's like, but you do it. And Data says, the servo mechanisms in my neck are designed to approximate human movements. I didn't realize they were so distracting. Timothy says, I like it, Data. Are there any other androids in Starfleet? And Data says, no, I'm the only one. Timothy says, how come you're not captain? Data says, my service experience does not yet warrant such a position. Timothy says, Data, what's the scariest thing that ever happened to you? Fear is a quality that I do not possess. Timothy says, because it's an emotion. Come here. Come here. She's back. Data says, that's correct. But what if you had a nightmare? Ah, Timothy's having nightmares. He needs comfort. He needs a kitty cat. He didn't need a kitty cat. Need a kitty cat hug. I need a new kitty cat. I need several more kitty cats. Sandy here needs a playmate. She needs someone to play with. She's the youngest, and she's the one that really, really needs someone to play with all the time. But yeah. And then I need a comfort cat. We have our children that want to be held when they want to be held. But I need the comfort cat, the rare one that will let you hold them when you want to hold them. I did a whole thing on that way back when. So Data says, I've never had a nightmare. I do not require sleep. And he says, Timothy, are you having nightmares? And Timothy says, I do not require sleep. And Data fixes his hair. So then Dr. Crusher, obviously been informed of the situation, plays along with the situation, and tells Timothy that his transfer circuits are functioning properly. And Timothy says within established parameters, and Dr. Crusher says absolutely input processing pattern recognition all within established parameters. And Data and the boy go, thank you. Okay, I just wanted to show you the next scene. Data and Timothy are painting, and Timothy's painting's a little, he's had some nightmares. He's got some issues there. That's a very angry or scared or frightened child. My baby keeps coming back today. I'm blessed. So then, Timothy says he ran out of red paint, and then Data says you can use mine. And Timothy yawns, he's really, really tired. And Data says, perhaps you should return to your quarters. And Timothy said, I'm fine. The servo mechanisms in my mouth are designed to approximate human movements. And Data tries to, yeah, unsuccessfully, of course, but he tries. Timothy says, that's not bad. Data says, thank you. It's very expressive. Thank you. Data says, is your painting representative of something? Timothy says, it's just a painting. Data says, Timothy, you understand that you may speak with me about anything, any subject. Timothy says, I understand. Data says, at times I too find it difficult to share my thoughts with others. I am not always confident that I am expressing myself in a manner which humans can comprehend. But I do know, and he turns over and Timothy is past that call. Here's a better picture of Timothy's painting. Obviously he's really, really talented, but he's really, really scared or angry or something. So then we're back on the bridge again. Worf says we are approaching the perimeter. I'm picking up the gravitational wave fronts. Riker says engage shields 35%. Worf says shields up. The ship shakes a little. Picard says, drop to 1/4 impulse. And Ensign says, yes, sir. And Riker says, bridge engineering. LaForge says, adjusting shield frequencies now, Commander. We'll have this smoothed out in a second. Riker says, Ensign, adjust course for any deviations. Ensign says, yes, sir. Riker says, resume 1/3 impulse. And then Worf has a couple of conflicting sensor readings. He says, I'm reading something 400 kilometers off the starboard, possibly a ship. And then they go to red alert, and then he says the things move to the other side. Wait, I'm picking up another reading 400 kilometers off port bow, but now it's gone. Now it's back to starboard. Riker says, Captain, the black cluster is distorting our sensors. We're picking up echoes of the Enterprise reflecting off the wavefront. Hint. Ricard says, cancel red alert. Mr. Worf, adjust the sensors to compensate for the distortion. Worf says, aye, sir. Picard says, sensor difficulties have been replaced by ships traveling through the black cluster, but never this extreme. Worf says, Captain, that formation is 7 times more massive than any explored previously. That should explain the difference. Picard says, resume previous course, Ensign. Ensign says, aye, sir. Then Troy and Data are watching or observing the kids in the classroom. Now I wonder if that's two-way glass or just one way. Can the kids see that they're there? Just a thought. So then Troy says, Data says, he laughed. And Troy says, yes, that's nice. Data says, it's not certainly consistent with his android persona. Troy says, I say he's beginning the process of letting go of that fantasy. Data says, then my work is done. And Troy says, not so fast, Data. A laugh is one step in the right direction. We need to help him take a few more steps. And Data's like, how, counselor? And Troy says, I'd like to talk to him about your own fascination with humanity. If you can explain to Timothy the appeal that humanity has for you, he might find it easier to become a boy again. Okay, so then we're back in 10 forward having a dessert. Now, once again, I will bring up the fact that he's a machine. And what is a machine doing in taking liquid? And if the liquid comes in, where does it go? Does it sit, especially something like that absolutely has acid in it? Does it eat his circuits? How does he expel it? I mean, you've got two things. If Data is 100% computer, then why is he intaking fluids, especially fluids with acidity in them that could eat his circuits, that could do some damage? And where does it go when he takes it in? And how does it leave his body? This whole concept is too far. They're expecting us to believe that Data is 100% machine, yet he's drinking with the kid. And there have been other times when he's eaten and drinking too. But he's an android. He's a computer. A computer can't eat food. Sometimes this series, messes with us a little bit. So Timothy says, this is great. How is yours? And Data says, the polysaccharides in reaction with the carbon dioxide produces the unusual combination of texture and effervescence. Timothy says, but how does it taste? Is it good? I am not capable of tasting in the manner you suggest. However, I can analyze the composition of a dessert and make comparable conclusions about its possible effect on the human palate. But I neither like it or dislike it. Timothy says, oh, I didn't realize that. Data says, I've often wondered what it must be like to have one's mouth water in anticipation of the arrival of a confection, or to feel the pleasure I have observed in humans as they consume it. You sound like you don't want to be an android. Data says, I am an android that will never change. Timothy says, but if you could change, would you? Data says, I've often wished to be human. I study people carefully in order to more closely approximate human behavior. Timothy's like, why? We're stronger and smarter than humans. We can do more than they can. Data says, I cannot take pride in my abilities. I cannot take pleasure in my accomplishments. Timothy says, but we never feel bad either. Data says, I would gladly risk feeling it bad at times if that also meant that I could taste my dessert. Yes, ice cream. So then we're back on the bridge of the Enterprise. Worf is saying, Captain, gravitational wavefront intensity is increasing steadily. 1100 standard G units and rising. So tell me, what are 111 G units and rising? I have no idea what this stuff is. Do any of you sci-fi people out there know what this stuff is? I'm just saying. I'll say one thing. It's pretty. I like purple. I like blue. Ah, let's see if anyone's out there, Mr. Wolf. Attempt a wide-range sensor sweep. Aye, sir. Gravitational distortion is too great, Captain. The scanning signals again being reflected off the wavefronts. I'm unable to compensate. The sensors are useless. There's a hint in there. Mr. Data, to the bridge, please. Acknowledge. Picard says, adjust sensors to short range. Attempt a limited positron scan. Worf says the distortion is still in effect. Riker says, better jacket the scanning beam. How do you jacket the scanning beam? How do you jacket the scanning beam? All you technical peeps out there, could you explain that one? Oh, sorry. So Data enters the bridge, goes over to the science station. Picard says, adjust sensors to short range. Attempt a limited positron scan. Worf says the distortion is still in effect. I already did that part. Picard says, Mr. Data, our sensors have been rendered ineffective by the field distortion. I want your analysis. Mr. Worf, fire phaser's maximum intensity, limited spectrum, 001 Mark 045. Riker says, an experiment, Captain, exactly number one. Worf firing phasers. The single shot branches off into different directions. Picard says, explanation, Mr. Data. Phaser energy was reflected by the gravitational wave fronts in similar to the phenomenon distorting our signal. Picard says, phasers and sensors both have a useless. Mr. Data, this reflection phenomenon, would it have the same effect on the disruptor-style weapon? Data says yes, disruptors would be ineffectual. Picard says, a ship cloaking field? Data said it would be extremely difficult to maintain. Mr. Data, is it likely that the VICO could have been attacked inside the cluster? Data says, given the effects we've observed, the possibility is exceedingly remote, sir. Picard to Counsel Troy, yes, Captain. Could you bring Timothy to my ready room? Picard asks Timothy, can you tell us what happened to your ship? I did tell you. Troy says, tell us again. Timothy says, we were attacked. Data says that is highly unlikely. Our investigation has clearly demonstrated. We were attacked. We were attacked, Timothy says. Data says, Timothy, androids do not lie. Timothy said, it was me. Data says, please explain. It was me. I did it. I killed them all. Everything was shaking. I lost my balance. I was trying to hold on to something. I didn't mean to do it. Picard says, what was it you didn't mean to do, Timothy? So Timothy's explaining that he believes because his arm hit the computer panel and that's what destroyed the ship. Troy said the ship was damaged when your arm hit the computer panel. Timothy, listen to me. The damage to your ship might have occurred at the same time your arm hit the panel, but it was only a coincidence. This wasn't your fault. And Timothy's like, yes, it was. And Data says, that's not possible. The onboard control systems for every starship require a user clearance code. You could not have inadvertently affected any of VICO's systems. Picard says, your computer had safety precautions. There was nothing you could have touched that would have damaged your ship. Troy says, you're not responsible for what happened to your parents, Timothy. Timothy says, but if it wasn't me, because we are trying to determine what happened right now, and if there's anything you can remember that may assist. Timothy said, the ship shakes a little bit, and Timothy says, that's just how it started on the VICO with the ship shaking. Okay, so then we're on the ship, the bridge, and Worf says, and wave intensity has increased. VICO says increase shields to 75%. Worf increases it. The wave sets off alarms. Damage Mr. Worf. Worf says minimal. Shields are holding. Picard says ensign full about. Go to warp 2. And the ensign says the gravitational distortion is too high. We can't maintain a warp field. Picard says full shields. Worf says aye. Captain, impulse power has been disrupted. The helm won't respond. Timothy says we couldn't get out either. Troy says, Timothy, perhaps you and I should go below and get out of everyone's way. Timothy's like, no. Riker's like, Riker to the forge, can you give me more power to the shields? Geordi's like, stand by. Timothy says, that's what they kept saying, more shields, more shields. Data says, Timothy, they go over to the science station. I want you to recall everything you heard people say about the VICO just before it was destroyed. Timothy, I don't know, just that, just more shields. And Data does all his stuff. So, oh, that didn't go right. But anyways, Data does his little analyzing stuff, and he gets up and he says, drop shields. Do you need to drop shields right away? And the Forge says reaction. I missed a spot here. The Forge says fusion reactors 4 through 9 into shield array that could double the shield strength. Worf says wave intensity has increased by an order of magnitude. Impact and they get shifted. And then Data comes up and says to drop shields. And Riker says that's suicide, Data. And Captain says drop the shields, make it so. Worf says, going off. Okay, she's finished. So they drop shields. So our Data says so they make it so, and everything completely stops. Everything returns to normal. Data says our shields caused the increase in the wavefront, so we were experiencing a harmonic amplification effect. Riker says the more energy we dumped into the shield grid, the worse the impact. Data says precisely. That is also what destroyed the VICO. When Timothy remembered similar procedures on his ship, I initiated the analysis of the shield output to the wavefront amplitude and discovered a correlation. So Picard says if we had transferred all that power to warp shields, it would have torn the ship apart. Riker says engine status. Ensign says navigation is coming back online. Picard says full 1/4 impulse, take us out of here. So then we have two small final scenes, and I've been horrible trying to capture it. They observe Timmy in the classroom again, and he's laughing a little bit, and he's slowly becoming more human. And Troy says, is it difficult? And Data's like, difficult? And Troy says, like, to watch him moving away from being like you. Data says that would require an emotional context, which I'm not able to provide. So then their Data talks to Timothy and says, hi, Data, how are you? He goes, I'm operating within established parameters. How are you? Timothy says, I miss my parents, but I'm okay. I guess you thought I was pretty silly when I had my hair like yours and everything. Data says, I've been told the imitation is the highest form of flattery. Timothy says, can we still do things together even if I'm not an android? Data says, I have many human friends. I would be pleased to count you among them. Timothy says, that would be acceptable. So there we are. that is the end of hero worship. And oops, I have screwed up again. I am really messing up today, aren't I? So, so we've done a matter of time. We've done new ground. Today we did hero worship, and I hope you join me next week for violations, and I hope you join me each and every week for my Star Trek Next Generation recap. And please hit the like and subscribe. Thank you.